Bring a Trailer podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bring a Trailer podcast. Alex Porter here, Director of Auction Production for Bring a Trailer, joined for the first time today by Beck Diefenbach, who is the manager of our white glove department. Beck, how are you, buddy?
I'm good. Howdy, Alex. How are you today?
Oh, man, I'm excited to have you here. It's I think people like it when we bring in new folks, new staffers. You definitely earned your place here today because you came up with a really cool idea for a discussion topic, which is collections that have been on the site. Your department has handled some of those. We've had a couple interesting ones. We've got a couple interesting collections live right now as we're recording. But before we do that, I thought we could talk about white glove a little bit. People get really confused about what glove means. What's the number one thing people get confused about when they call you for white glove service?
Oh, man. Number one would definitely be, what is white glove versus premium listings? Mm-hmm. That is a common it doesn't help that white glove is kind of the CIA of Bring a Trailer. We're kind of a clandestine service that people don't really know.
Nobody knows.
In the shadows.
You could be up to anything.
All that happens is like an announcement comes on to the website, like the one we had recently that's like, this is brought by the white glove department. And people wonder like, well, then how did that happen? But yeah, that's the big one is how does it differ from premium listings? And the easiest way to explain is white glove service is a service to get your car on the site, and premium listings is a section on the website.
But Beck, I'm willing to pay more to get my car into the premium section. Can't you help me with that?
Oh, man. Short answer, no. Basically, the idea behind premium, I think that it makes it so special and so unique is that it is curated just like how the
and it can be a $99 listing, right? Like there's
completely. It doesn't matter what pathway you take in. It's the best of the best of what's on VAT. I think the slogan internally we often use is find another.
Totally. But a lot of white glove cars, because you guys do take in such interesting vehicles, a lot of white glove cars do end up as premium auctions, correct?
For sure, which definitely also adds to the confusion.
Totally.
We have a white glove customer who comes in, has an amazing car. It makes it on premium. They're like, I want to do it again. They come in a second time
with a slightly less
important car. And we have to explain to them, so sorry, but that's a totally different thing. But yeah, there's a decent amount of overlap. I mean, just due to the price point of the service, that means you're going to sort of self-segregate a little bit as to who is considering sort of a all hands on deck.
Sure, a lot of people are perfectly fine going through our standard product is a wonderful product.
Correct. And plus service is the best bang for your buck.
Which is the photography that you
correct,
can tack on.
$429, the middle tier, if you will, is really kind of the solution that the majority of people sort of really need. White glove service kind of swoops in for customers who maybe the value of their time is very high. Maybe they want to make sure that the one time they do this is the right way.
Sure. They want to talk on the phone. That's a big one.
They want to talk on the phone.
You're on the phone all the time, dude.
They might be. It's a lot of time in this room, in this podcast studio. It doubles as Beck's unofficial office where phone calls are taken. Not on these fancy microphones, though. Just on my iPhone.
Does it remind you of your aviation days? It's a little bit like having a Bose headset back on or a David Clark.
Yes, but far more comfortable.
Yes.
The aviation headsets would always pinch my head.
I used to get a pain right in the top of my head.
Right at the top in the middle. And I think that was the Bose sound canceling ones that were like $1,000 that all the flight instructors had, but I never had. They were like by far the most comfortable and happy people. While I'm there like with my giant meatball.
You got to pay the cost to be the boss buddy, just like a white glove seller.
Correct. Great segue back, Alex.
That's right. I'm a pro.
You are a pro, seasoned pro.
Talk to me a little bit about the services that your team provides, this CIA kill team inside VAT. You're not murdering our sellers, so what are you guys doing?
We have three main attributes to white glove service that differentiates it from the other ones. Number one is always going to be the presentation. Essentially, we want to offer our customers a turnkey solution to the presentation of their auction.
With the minimal effort on their part, right?
That's the idea. Yep. It's essentially, if you're willing to pay this amount, it's probably that you value your time to an extent that having a professional who's brought in, who's done this many times before, who has an extensive shot list that's been developed over thousands of auctions that we've produced, knowing sort of what are the holes people tend to miss, what are the questions people tend to ask. So it's not just a shot list that's based off of like what makes a good photo gallery in general. It's what makes a great BAT photo gallery.
Yeah, the presentation is the key, as we say all the time, right? Like
correct.
That's the most important thing in a BAT listing.
Because there's sort of two elements to that. One would be inspiring a lot of confidence in the buyers, right, to get hopefully a great result. But number two is also to try and reduce the workload of the seller.
Right.
Because once the auction goes live, if you produce your own photos and there's a gap in the presentation and someone says, hey, I didn't see this photo of this stamping, whatever, that's kind of reasonable. Like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. I'll go get it now. Mm-hmm. But when you're hiring a pro to get it done for you, it's kind of a bad experience to then 2 days in be like, why isn't this in the gallery?
Oh my God, I get my photographer back out here or something.
Correct.
Whereas you and your white glove team, like the rest of us who work in the bring a trailer production side of things, we know exactly what people are going to ask for. Mm-hmm. So we can anticipate that and get all the right stuff in the gallery right from the start.
And that's the idea with the videos as well.
Sure.
The 3 videos that we do.
Collecting those documents back. Always so hard to get the documents out of people.
Getting documents, once we get them, it's such a relief. Then the real work is digesting them, redacting them, doing all that for the seller as well. But that's the idea of the first step. The second one is a bit of enhanced marketing for our white glove customers, because their cars typically are some of the better, more exciting offerings that we get to.
And we know they have great pics.
And we know we've got guaranteed great photos because we've done them
and
in-house.
Good videos. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And good videos. We'll do some enhanced marketing for them.
For cars that are the coolest cars and have great presentations, those are the ones we want to feature on our social media pages. Correct. And want to do. We never guarantee anything, but if we want to put the best, most exciting cars on our social media channels and in the carousel at the top of the website, or as we talked about before, even on the premium page, which only 20 or 25 of 900 live auctions are premium. But a lot of times white glove does fit into that stuff because of the level of car that you guys are taking. And to your earlier point, a lot of the cars that get pitched to you don't necessarily require that, right? That's what you were saying earlier. A lot of them fit just fine in a traditional bring a trailer classic auction.
A lot of it comes also down to, I think, what reach the car needs, right? If you're coming in the door with a 991 GT3.
Which is the whole idea behind premium anyways, right? Get the car on the website longer because it's a $500,000 car or $1 million car, and the prospective buyers really want to do their due diligence.
Or it's an SCRS 911 that only 20 of them exist. It's all I have on the site right now. People didn't even know that even existed.
Right.
That kind of stuff.
You just send your mechanic across the country to go have a look before the auction ends.
2 weekends. That's what I sell to sellers. You need 2 weekends for this. But yeah, if you need to spread a larger net out there, that enhanced marketing can be helpful. Right.
We try to bring in all the resources for these cars when they're really special. And the pool of buyers might not be that big. So we want to get as many eyeballs. I mean, bring a trailer is great at getting eyeballs on cars, obviously, regardless. But when it's not a huge number of people in the market for an SCRS, or what is it? SCRS?
It's an SCRS.
That's the 911 SC, kind of rally car. Is that what
it is?
Yeah. Okay.
So technically, it was actually made in '84.
Is that live right now?
It's live right now.
God, I didn't even know that. Let me pull that up. School me on it while I'm pulling it up.
Okay. Well, so as a very humble 911 SC owner myself, we don't have many motorsport derived SCs to sort of champion and sort of hold up, because at the time,
what is there other than the RS?
I mean, the problem is they weren't racing naturally aspirated 911s.
They were RSRs at that time.
It was earlier, 74, 75 RSRs, but by that point, they were really just all racing turbos. And so there is.
Oh, I did see this car. Of course, it's Bill Noon. Symbolic, of course. Mm-hmm. Yep, great car.
So these things they're technically have to be built on a 930 chassis. And really the only SC thing about it is the bottom end of the block. But this division in Group B was 3 liters or below. So if they ran a 3.2, which is what the Carrera was in '84, they would have run the 4-liter class, which I believe the 959 was actually intended for.
Interesting.
And so they didn't want to be in, obviously, 2 cars in one class. And so they ran in the 3-liter class. They got trounced.
By what? What would have been racing at this?
037s,
Lanchas? Yeah, okay.
Quattros, Sport Quattros.
Oh, yeah.
If you look up the Wikipedia page for this year.
But people love Safari 911s, and this is the real deal.
Correct.
Safari 911.
I mean, this is also looks so much more similar to what the modern Safari 911, because everyone does big bumper cars to do them with. And so this is kind of the quintessential one. But yeah, technically built on a 930 chassis, hence the wide flares and 930 brakes. Then MFI 3-liter case. So kind of RSR-esque power plant from a 74,
935 cylinder heads, it says. So it's kind of its own thing. It's a completely cobbled together deal.
Deal of it's kind of a best of naturally aspirated 911s at the time, but of course for loose surface stuff, hence the stance, hence the lack of aero, that sort of thing.
I'm kind of pro Safari. Is that controversial? Especially now that they're falling out of favor a little bit. I know there was a trend there for a little while, and I guess it's not falling out of favor because there's the Dakar. Porsche's building their own thing now that's like a rally car. But I've always thought, especially since we live in San Francisco where the roads are so terrible, some sidewall, a little bit of suspension,
Oh man, bottom out your front suspension in your 911 Targa.
That construction over by Terraval, like over by your house. Yes. I was driving the 912 through there the other day and I hit probably only a 2-inch cut into the road, and it felt like the whole bottom of my car was impacting the street.
The wincing feeling of the front strut, just
you feel it in all your chest. It
goes through the bones.
Yes,
yeah. No, it is a bad feeling. So yes, a Safari built impact bumper 911, which we've done a few of. A few people have, I think, built some pretty amazing cars sort of geared towards that. I agree that in town that would be really beneficial. I think part of the issue is actually what Matt Farah came across when he had his Safari 911, is that in order to enjoy it, he had to drive it so far away to get
get on dirt or bad pavement.
Yeah, to get to the type of road where it would be fun to, that it was just it was so much of it.
But that's the same thing with my GT3, dude. I drove it over here today and I was like, this is awful. To enjoy this, I need to drive an hour out of town. Sure. You know what I mean?
That's true. Yeah, it's getting, once you get to that power level, I would imagine it's tough. I have to imagine. I've never driven a car like that before.
It's not that crazy, but it's the ride, really. It's that's so low and bumpy, and I have to slow down so much for speed bumps. Just got a new lip on there, man. Got to protect it. I scratched it 10 times on the way to LA. It was horrible. You don't feel that quite in your chest the same way you do when you're bottoming out the front suspension in an old Porsche. But sorry, I want to ask a little bit more about White Glove, if that's okay.
Let's do it.
And maybe we can pivot into the big topic, which is collections. And that is, how do you, and I believe a couple of your colleagues do this too, how do you guys decide what is the right fit for White Glove? And maybe you can use that as a segue into collections. You've listed a couple of them through White Glove. We've had many collections on the site, but quite a few of them have been White Glove. Do you ever reject collections? How do you decide what's a good fit for White Glove and who to send over to kind of standard BAT service?
Sure. So when people reach out, sometimes people are just looking for better placement on the site, right? They're just looking for that premium listing. They're just looking for social
They may not know what's good. They're not that familiar with BAT, right?
Exactly. Yeah. What we really want to find are the cars that wouldn't normally get on the site because of the seller's situation, their experience or lack thereof, whether it's selling cars as a whole or whether it's just strictly with Bring a Trailer.
Or people who haven't done online before. You find that
Correct.
A lot, right? Yeah,
for sure.
People, they've done traditional tentpole auctions and they're a little bit nervous about online.
I'm on the phone every day with sellers who are like, I don't understand how this works.
Totally.
I've done this in person. I have a guy who handles this for me, some person who I go meet up with and drop off the keys and they deal with me. I don't know who you are. What is this space? And so that's a lot of my calls, is just talking with them about what Bring a Trailer is and how I can bring a personalized experience for them, because that's what we're looking for with White Glove. We want these cars that are great fits for BAT, but maybe the seller sees a bit of a hill to climb. We want to offer a path for them. When you ask about collections, sometimes people come in the door and they've got I've got 12 cars.
I don't know what to do with them.
I don't know what to do with them. In fact, that's every day.
Wait, before you go into this, I'm just curious. I'm playing the idiot here,
Sure.
and I know some of the answers to some of these questions because you and I have been colleagues for a long time. But I am also genuinely curious about this piece of what you just said, which is when folks have done this before but haven't done it on Bring a Trailer and they're nervous about it, what attracts them to Bring a Trailer? Usually how do they find out about us? Why the pivot from, selling cars in a way that they have before?
Sure.
Do you get a good impression of that?
Yeah. It's very often my brother says I need to do this.
Oh, right. Yeah.
My dad tells me to do this. My son, that's a big one. My son tells me to do this. My buddy, my neighbor, whatever it is.
You're letting people into the demographics of fancy car sellers.
It's that's who's telling me to do this. And often actually I'm talking with partners of the owner who they're a big pusher of Bring a Trailer. Right?
Okay.
They want to do it, but the owner doesn't really know it very well. That's a big one. Is usually, I think, at the end of the day, it requires that recommendation.
Sure.
In a previous life, I used to shoot weddings, actually. I was
you're a photographer by trade.
I was a professional photographer for a long time. And one of the things I did on the side was weddings. And I realized pretty early on that people weren't looking for the best photographer. They were looking for the first good one, because having to deal with the search is so
it's hugely stressful. Yeah,
very
totally.
stressful. And so the best thing you can possibly get is a referral, because a referral is the gold standard.
Sure,
right?
From somebody you trust. Yeah,
correct. If somebody you trust tells you, "Oh, just hire this person," you think about it with your home. Someone says, hire this contractor. You're like, done. That's what I'm doing. I'm not going to deal with like getting
Which is the case here at Bring a Trailer. We all share the same contractor. Don, shout out Don. Don's the man. I did the work here at the office too. Do you find that folks are blown away by the fees if they're used to traditional auction houses because it's so much cheaper to sell online? Or does that not even compute with them because it's so different?
I think what doesn't compute with them is the concept of the lack of a commission.
Yeah.
Like I've had some sellers who are just
like they're going to get me somewhere.
They're just like, I even have it now, like in my first pitch, like if they email in, I've got a first pitch just to sort of lay it all out that I send to them. And it even specifically says in it that this is the only fee. There is no other fees or other commission. And like often like one of the first or second questions is still like, okay, yeah, but what's the commission?
What's the real commission?
What's the real commission? Yeah. There isn't one, sir. It is a flat fee based on the level of service that you choose.
Yeah.
But for some people, I think that's such a part of the paradigm that it kind of confuses them. That does mean, though, that sometimes if we're doing several cars,
right,
that wall of listing fees can kind of, I think, unnerve them because they're not used to that.
Right.
If you were to take a collection of cars to a traditional auction house, they might be willing to waive some of that listing fee,
right,
in order to essentially make it on the backside of the commission.
Right.
Depends on how you negotiate with them. Whereas for us, that can be sort of an interesting opportunity for the seller if they're willing to do the math to find out that in the end, holy cow, they're going to be saving so much money, just an insane amount of money considering some of the cars that we're selling. But it can be difficult for them sometimes to understand in the first place.
I was trying to explain, God, who was it? We sold that Bugatti the other day for $4 million, 4 point something. It's our second highest sale ever. And I'm like, that guy paid $99 to sell that car.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's it. And this is his whole fee.
And it's crazy. The buyer
paid $7,500.
Right. I mean, that's
would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars of fees elsewhere. That's actually leads me into another question. You said something interesting before we started recording, which is, so we were just talking about collections on BAT in general. We've had many. You were involved in some before you worked in the white glove department. I want to talk about all these. There's some cool ones. But you said with white glove at least, and this happens too with just kind of traditional sellers, there are official collections that we package up and we throw a post up on the website and we say, hey, here's this collection. Often we give it a name, sometimes fun, sometimes goofy, sometimes kick-ass. And we kind of do some official promotion around it and we lump them all together and link them all to each other. But then there are other times where people are not doing an official collection per se, but do want to get rid of multiple cars. And that may be semi-invisible to buyers. But explain those two different kind of ways that people approach you about quote unquote collections.
Sure. So the initial email or call always starts with, I have X number of cars and I need to sell them.
And sometimes it's a huge number.
Usually it's in the hundreds. I've had calls that are in the hundreds.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's usually I have X number of cars. What do I do? And usually the follow-up questions have to be obviously what the cars are and to what do you actually really need? Do you need to sell all of these at one time? Or can we daisy chain them into a pipeline? Because the resultant appearance on this website would be either a collection event, which is, yes, we're announcing them with a big post.
Usually with a theme for that.
With a theme, because it has to have some sort of connective tissue.
Right.
The cars have to have some reason. Rarely is the owner themselves so impressive that they are, in fact, the connective tissue. They are for themselves.
Yep.
And sometimes by the result of them having sort of curated that collection, they're just naturally is a theme to them all. But sometimes it's completely across the board and makes really no sense. And in those situations, it probably isn't a situation where the sum of all the cars together is actually greater than selling the cars individually. And then if you multiply that by the fact that there is a decent amount of work, regardless of how much I assist the seller is still going to have to make sure that these cars are running.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And ready and clean for us to shoot them all.
And it's not the logistics of even just taking photos of all of them is semi-complicated. Even if we're doing all the work, you still got to roll them out and get them all set up and talk to the photographer.
Days.
Yeah, right.
We'll talk about that a little bit.
But you've even flown out to do some of this yourself, I think.
Correct, yes. Yeah. It's a logistical ballet.
Right.
To get all these cars done in an efficient manner, because you're also trying to be mindful of like the owner's time,
of course,
and their space.
Yep.
Sometimes we go to people's homes, right? And we're shooting these things, and we want to be out before it's like dinner time,
right?
So like, that's an important aspect for it as well. If they don't really fall in that category of a collection category, we'll still offer them sort of a solution that allows them to have a consistent series of cars on the site. So they're actually
every couple of weeks or months, another car's going live, right?
Back to back, just like one to one. Because if you can shoot all the cars, say like in a day or two, and then you sort of drip out the listings. It also reduces their workload when the cars are live.
If they're the one commenting on all of
Correct.
them.
If they don't have a staff or people working for them, they need it to run a little bit smaller, a little bit slower, so that they can actually...
It's not like Richard Rawlings answering the questions on 30 auctions closing in one day or something.
29, I want to say, I think it was listings closing on one day, all back to back. So there were 5-minute intervals, which of course with the Bring a Trailer 2-minute reset with every new bid, it meant that there were auctions
5 or 6 closing at this exact
literally
same time.
the exact same moment. Like we're multiple bars open. Now, very unique situation with Richard Rawlings, Gas Monkey Garage. He's got a staff, right? He's also a full professional.
You and I both worked with them. They were great.
It is. I flew down to Dallas, brought in 2 photographers. We had 29 things we had to shoot. We did it over the course of about 5 days. We had printed shot lists for every car. We had one guy, Corey Mater, shout out to him, a photographer for us based in Monterey, California. And then Andy Carter, who's in Atlanta, Georgia, brought them both in to do, one guy's doing all the exteriors and the undersides, and then we move it to the other side, and he's doing interiors and engine bays and all that kind of stuff. That's a massive undertaking. And it was really only possible because he's got a staff.
Yeah, and they know what they're doing. They've done this kind of stuff before, and they're such marketing geniuses. They're able to do a lot of the video and promotion on their own.
They've done harder things.
Totally. That was really like a partnership more than anything else.
For sure.
That was a kind of a unique situation.
And literally
awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, totally. Sorry, I cut you off because I did want to hear about the non-collection collections. What's the longest? I don't know if you have the stat on your head. What's the longest you've dripped out cars? Have you ever worked with anyone for like a year straight or even longer?
I have customers who
certainly months, right?
Definitely months. And I have customers who are repeat customers once or twice a month for the last 4 years.
Wow.
Who I am their pipeline. It's just,
MS Classic Cars.
MS Classic Cars would be
shout outs to.
Mark Shaliro in Massachusetts. He kind of comes in spurts because he's a crazy man. He travels the country.
He's a nut. I saw his horse ride or whatever it was like a coin-operated horse.
His kiddie ride. I mean, because Mark has an eye and a network to get the best of the best, whatever that thing is. I know,
and people come to the site to see his. Correct. I mean, he's like an event, in and of himself, kind of.
He very much is. People subscribe to his model page. He's got very much a brand that people just want to watch what he does. He has the repeat commenters who come to find his. He also, I think, helped early on crack the egg on making a lead image be your branding.
Totally. Inside with all the other cars behind, it's like iconic. Yeah,
exactly.
White floor, beautiful shot,
same angle. Yep. I remember the day when he told me that he was going to change his flooring. He used to have like a checkered white and black thing, and then he was switching to all white. That was a big deal for him. And I get it because that's his brand image. He kind of cracked that nut, I think, early on, noticing that on Bring a Trailer, one of the big value adds is the Bring a Trailer process, and that's our branding, and thus the username is relatively small and off to the side. So how do you, as a seller, whether you're a professional dealer or a private party seller, how do you make a brand on BAT? And a big one is that repeat seller. 911R,
totally.
Very similar. WAB.
Yeah, a lot of our power sellers. Anthony Serra. They have like a very consistent Jose Driver Source. They have that. They often do the car speeding, and he's done some collections too. A lot of these people have done collections. In fact, a lot of our power sellers. So Mark's not really a collection guy, but that is almost like a slow drip collection because they look the same. There's common themes. He likes muscle cars with beautiful builds, kind of a lot of resto mods. What do you call them? Like pro touring kind of deals.
A lot of pro touring mods, a lot of very original cars.
Oh, that's right. He has a lot of that.
He does a lot of those.
And then he likes the automobilia.
He loves automobilia. Yeah. I mean, you can see by like the interior.
It's in the background of his shop.
It's in his shop. I think it's in his life probably too. He's like helping people build out their caves.
Totally.
Right.
Which is what his shop also looks like.
Correct. Yes. An ideal, very well lit.
Yeah, that's right. Great wall art, all of that stuff.
Yes.
Fantastic.
I know I've seen.
Have you met him in person before?
Never met him in person.
Okay.
Millions of phone calls.
We should have him out here sometime.
I've seen people send him contact seller messages because, auction specialists, we can see
when somebody reaches out to the seller. Yeah.
Correct. So often it's like, hey, so that sign in the background.
Can I buy
that? Can I buy that? Right. Can I buy that horse in the background?
Just wait, people. It's probably coming.
It's probably coming. There's a few things that he's got in the background that I've seen him actually even post in the comments is not for sale.
Because they're his things.
Because they're his or something. It's too special.
Totally.
Can't find another.
Are there other sellers like him you want to shout out, or do you want to talk about your favorite collection? You've had some really interesting kind of collections. What's the first one that comes to your mind when you were thinking about this as a podcast topic?
I mean, for me, probably like the most formidable one I had early on was the Tahoe Maritime Museum.
Oh man, what a bear that thing was. You and I worked on that
That's
together.
a massive one.
Set that one up. That was crazy.
Sure. So Tahoe Maritime Museum was, unfortunately,
Past
on the
tense.
shores of Lake Tahoe, not too far from here, about three and a half hours east of San Francisco. And they had a amazing, dense collection of mahogany boats, hydroplanes.
But they had motors
boats,
too. Remember, they had some of those
vintage
big
motors,
maritime,
outboard motors and indoor motors, Scripps motors, V12s, the whole shebang.
some of those huge, like World War II aviation style things.
Yeah, when you're talking about like liter displacement for the
30
2 digits.
liter, yeah,
Correct. Yes.
yeah.
Massive, massive stuff. And this was early in the pandemic. This was summer of 2020.
Okay.
And they were going to transition from being
Did we do all that from home?
all from home.
God, I can't even. I forgot that. For some reason, I picture us doing that in the old office, but I guess I'm wrong.
I was mailing a hard drive back and forth between
Crazy.
the operator of the.
So was that White Glove or not White Glove?
Fully White Glove.
Okay.
So that was.
When did White Glove start? When's the beginning of this? 2019?
So again, clandestinely.
Yeah. Okay.
It started before it was announced. I would say probably late 2018.
Well, you started in 2017, 2018, and you worked your way up like everyone except me from the auction specialist.
Yeah.
And then you were the whole White Glove department for some amount of time, right? It was just you.
It was
right?
just me for a couple of years. I basically was, I think I was the first hired in-house staff writer. Up until that point, everyone
correct.
Had
We only had a few, and they were
writers.
mainly and they were contractors, not employees.
They were contractors,
Yeah.
exactly. And so I remember that felt very unique, and I think you were building out a team.
We were.
This is when you spent most of your days just editing listings.
I'm editing again,
You're
man.
still editing?
Well, my fingers are starting to work again.
Little
They were
atrophied?
seized up. Yes, they are. They are a little atrophied. I've got one open right now that I'm not going to say the car, but I need to get to it as soon as we're done here. Sorry, go ahead.
I was doing the grind. I was writing listings every day. And then it was, I want to say it was late 2018. There was some.
We knew we had a need for these folks who were like, I want elevated service. For folks who don't know, we don't talk on the telephone typically. We do everything digitally for efficiency, and also just because it's nice to have things in writing. You could talk a little bit about how tricky it is to do things on the phone. It's a very different business, and would basically, with our costs, be impossible to do if we did it a wholesale for all listings. But we knew we had a need for this higher level of service. Mm-hmm. And so we tapped you, and it's been a uphill climb ever since. I bet you have stats, and I want to hear about how many you've done since then. Is it over 1,000?
Specific listings?
White Glove.
Oh, White Glove.
Yes,
definitely.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Crazy.
Because we did over 500 last year alone.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. Okay, so a couple thousand maybe.
A couple thousand possibly. I mean, just like Bring a Trailer as a whole, it's increased.
Totally,
right?
of course. But it was slow to start with, and that's why the Tahoe was so daunting.
That was why it was such a big deal. It was 42 listings to produce. We did about 4 to 5 every week for however many weeks that is. I think it was around 8 weeks or so in total.
I remember them. Hydroplanes.
It was crazy. Miss Tahoe was the top sale.
That's the triple cockpit Garwood.
We had a couple triple cockpits, a couple Chris Crafts, obviously.
Some really old ones too. That's when I found out about the Coronado, which is now my favorite wooden boat, the one with the sliding roof, like a 50s,
absolutely.
Like a
full
50s jet
50s
era
style interior as well. Some of those boats were genuinely amazing. Some of them needed a lot of love. They've been out of the water for a long time. Some of them had maintained really well. I think a lot of it depended upon how important the boat was.
But a lot of them were no reserve, or almost all of them, right?
Almost everything was no reserve. The only things that had a reserve was there was an engine, a Scripps V12, and Miss Tahoe.
Which we did sell.
Which we did sell,
$200,000, as I recall.
$225, I want to say it was. And so, and stayed local. Bay Area guy bought it. And so that was the crown jewel of the whole thing. It was well known. I mean, talk about a name to have on a boat in Tahoe. So that was a big one. It was quite an ordeal, but it really actually taught us a lot about how to produce collection events on Bring a Trailer. When we're doing them in-house, that's very different than when a dealer or a broker is coming to us with, here's my 10 cars. They're all gated Ferraris. Right. I've already prepped them all. I've already done all the photos.
Come on, Beck. I told you to silence that thing.
That's my computer going on. Oh, gosh, I'm sorry about that.
All of our kids are about to get off school, so it's all about to go. I was just checking my phone. It's all about to go haywire. Dad, where are you? Sorry, go ahead.
No worry. Mine is like the tingling up the spine when your phone rings and it says preschool on it. Oh no.
Panic mode. It's either your child is hurt, which is horrible, or even worse, your child has hurt another child.
Oh yeah. I haven't had that one yet. Mine is your child is very sick.
Oh yeah, well there's also
and
that
they were
one.
probably sick when you dropped them off.
Correct. So thank you, a-hole. Yeah.
So with Tahoe Maritime, that really set us up for...
And that was a pretty slow drip, as I remember. That was 2 months or so it took us to get all that
It was
out.
about 8 weeks.
8 weeks, yeah, okay.
And so that was like, how do you structure it in a way such that it's doable by the seller, but also digestible? Doesn't overwhelm them, but it's also digestible by Bring a Trailer. Because something that's very crucial to us, we have a scheduling team who all they do is they look at all the listings that are ready to go live, and they look at the ones that are already live. They take into account the seller's needs, and they sort of massage those all into the best possible.
Extremely hard to do.
Incredibly difficult.
Yes.
The fact that Zach did it solo for so long is just insane.
Yeah.
There's now like a team of people who do what one guy did.
And it's still very, very hard.
Correct.
Yep.
And so with that, we sort of realized, based off of sort of what the seller needs and what the cars are, how are we going to fit this in? Which, to be honest, even to this day, educates us in how we're structuring these things, because as of right now, we have this 16-car collection out of Dallas.
Which is from you.
Which is from me,
Glove,
from the White Glove department.
And then we have another collection live that's sick too, that's not White Glove.
Which is not, with the Black Series.
Yeah, all the AMG
cars.
Black cars,
Sort of a very different mentality. One is a very tight-knit group of very similar, right? I think that's a great example of the sum of those cars would be greater than all of those selling individually.
Correct.
Because I think there is a value add of someone saying, this is coming out of someone who clearly knows these cars very well, who knows how to service them. And also, I'm going to brag about it. Like if you're driving this car someplace and be like, I got this on the Black Series collection on VAT. That's like, I think like a classic setup for that.
Totally.
For the one that came out of the White Glove department, the Lone Star All-Stars collection that's live, or part of it is live right now. That's a single private party seller. He's a collector, huge car fan, huge enthusiast, loves preservation examples of all types. And so those 16 cars, it's not all of his cars, but it's a majority. And he needed to find a way to tap into Bring a Trailer, how to leverage the BAT marketplace while also not having it take over his life.
Right.
And so that's where we came in. And that was a combination of bringing in photographers, shooting it over multiple days, and then also structuring the live auctions that work for him. So they're all going live in sort of 3 to 5 car packets over the course of this month. The last cars will end before the end of May, in order to make sure that he can sort of survive having that many cars live, as opposed to Richard Rawlings, who had...
Well, that man's a maniac. Rawlings is a maniac.
Who had 30 closing in one morning.
5 or 6 is crazy enough. I mean, even some of the guys we mentioned earlier, our main power sellers, 1600 Veloce, 911R, WAB, sometimes those guys have 15, 16, even 20 cars live, and they have to have a staff to deal with that. So 16 cars where you're the only owner and you're dealing with all of them, it's too much. The AMG Black Collection is only 5 or 6 cars. And that's from Silver Arrow Cars, another power seller of ours located in Vancouver. And so they have a staff to handle that too. So, I mean, more than 5 or 6 at a time is too much, really, I think. Unless again, you have a staff that can handle it, or you're Richard Rawlings and you're a maniac who also had a staff. Yeah. What other ones come to mind? You and I were downstairs brainstorming a little bit. You had, we can go anywhere you want. You had a Fox-body collection, which was really interesting. You had a Z-car collection, which was really interesting. Those had kind of a similar flavor in that they were both kind of preservation examples and very focused collectors who would want to collect those groups of cars. I'm glad we talked about the boat one. We also have a bunch of collections that weren't White Glove that I'd love to chat about. But what come to your mind, Beck, as kind of the highlights for White Glove in terms of collections?
Yeah, the Datsun Z collection comes definitely to the front of my mind.
Beautiful cars and some maybe record sales in there. Some really big
couple of record sales in there. I mean, it's tough to beat Mark Schillero's Yellow Z.
I think green. I think that one's going to be record forever. Green. Yeah.
But yeah, the Datsun Z collection was 6 cars, most of which were, again, very low mileage, very original cars.
One 280s, and I think a 282 plus 2. Some of the unloved ZX, ones too.
Yeah, 2 plus 2.
Yeah,
or not ZX, 280Z 2 plus 2. And then there was a Series 1 car that would have been restored by PRZ. Right. That one sold for, I want to say, 160.
Yep.
So like crazy good results. It was in the fall of 2022. So it was also kind of peak market.
Yes.
Kind of a great
or a little
time.
Afterwards, but still peak for Zs. I mean,
peak for Zs. And that was like a classic case of like these cars don't compete against each other, but at the same time they elevate each other, because you know that every one of those cars is coming out of a home that understood the importance of it. And
somebody was looking for the best examples of each one of the S30 chassis cars.
And now that seller out of Santa Barbara, has transitioned into being a regular seller on Bring a Trailer.
Oh, interesting.
So he now mostly
Still Z's
Porsches.
or other stuff?
No, mostly Porsches.
Okay, interesting.
He was actually kind of a Porsche Ferrari guy at heart, but his very first car out of college was a 280Z 2+2, and he'd always been on the hunt for another one, and he had this like 3,800 mile example.
I'm sure the best one left around. Those cars are usually leaking oil on the side of somebody's driveway.
And so that sparked him sort of like building this little collection that he had. And then afterwards, he loved the experience. He genuinely enjoyed being a seller on the site. He's a very modern guy who sort of adapted to what Bring a Trailer is all about. And while he's handling his auctions a little bit more on his own, he still works with me in White Glove. And he's had some phenomenal Porsche results.
Like long hoods? What kind of stuff is he into?
Some long hoods, some impact bumper. Last car he did was a 75 US market Carrera.
Which color was that?
Red.
I love those US market. I think I've told you this. One of my dreams is to buy a US market Carrera with the crappy 2.7 and then build a MFI.
Well, sure. Okay. So the biggest caveat possible is like, I really love US market cars, except the engine.
Well, no, I like the colors on them and I like the spec. Sure. I like the flares. Like they came in cool. I like the script. I like impact bumper Carreras.
First half of the 70s.
Yep.
Well, I mean, that's added in all the long hoods, but I mean, earlier sort of narrow bodies.
Well, me, it's my 912E, right? I've got that
Correct.
body style. I like that era, the first of the impact bumpers, which were unloved forever, although that is over, obviously.
True, but I mean, they provide like the best platform, right? They're very well made. They're galvanized steel.
Right.
By that point, so they're hopefully not turned into rust buckets by now. And
they're
also
not that different than your car, honestly. I mean, yours is just the next evolution.
Yeah, the 78, just first year of the SC, which has, I think, motor-wise, kept the value up a little bit higher than the narrow bodies, and thus those narrow bodies became so popular to hot rod. And
they've all been fixed though. Now all those 2.7s have either been rebuilt or replaced with a 3-liter or a 3.2 or something.
It's the same reason why people stop asking about IMS bearings on 996s. Like they've all been done by now.
Yep. And now you have the secondary arguments where people are like, "But was it done recently enough? It needs its second LN engineering."
It hasn't had the solution.
That's right.
The oil plumbed solution.
Where's Jake Raby? Another project you and I worked on. We need a 996 discussion sometime back. Talk about the Fox-body collection a little bit. That one I loved. I loved that one.
I loved it too. One of the best collectors, honestly, I've worked with.
In terms of just personality.
And love of cars and helpfulness.
And a little bit of a sense of humor too.
For sure. Because also this guy, like, if you knew what other cars he had, he's a big Mustang fan.
Right.
And he's got 65 Shelbys.
Yeah.
And the fact that
4 GTs and stuff too, right?
The fact that he even collected Fox-body Mustangs, right? Like the redheaded stepchild of the Mustang.
Oh, be careful, Beck. Don't give out your home address after saying Randy might come after you.
He might. Those cars tend to be, kind of put off to the side.
Totally.
Right? And for him to have put them sort of in an important place, I thought was pretty unique. And so
I knew he had what? It was a Sailor. I knew I had an SVO, which is the one I always wanted.
SVO, 2 GTs, an early and a late car, had an ASC McLaren.
That's right. The non-intercooled turbo, right?
Yes.
Yep.
And then it had a Celine.
Yes.
Coupe, white wheels.
Which is like
phenomenal.
Yes.
The best spec. Yeah. Very Randy spec.
Yes. And Colin Comer had a really good one of those. We've only had a few really good examples of those, and they're awesome.
That was such a great group. It was such a cohesive idea. It was a kind of a precursor to that Datsun Z collection. They didn't conflict with each other. They elevated each other. He was so psyched about it. He was commenting regularly about it. He loved it. He's actually a Ford store owner.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And so he's got this new car side of him that's like helping him sort of sustain this collection side of him. And I think that was such a nice reprieve for him.
Totally.
And he's become honestly a great resource. I've even like called him up on like other Mustangs and asking him questions about stuff.
Really cool cars. And despite all the terrible things you said to disparage, your home address is not kidding.
I'm not the one who makes it.
I'm teasing.
Everybody else.
But they are like a fan favorite. People, because people of our age, like that was,
oh my God.
At high school, that's what everyone had.
Right.
Right.
Everyone
some flow masters, some power pulleys.
Yeah. Does it have a 5.0 badge on the side?
Yep.
That's all that really mattered.
That's right.
I didn't really there was definitely 5.0s in my high school parking lot. I grew up here in the city, and they were.
Well, you're a little younger than me too. So
I'm a little younger. Not that much younger.
Yeah.
A little bit younger. But 5.0s were in the parking lots. They were definitely Flowmaster or Terminator exhaust.
Oh, sure. Sure.
Really, if you needed to change your back window into plexiglass.
But you definitely needed the 2 big outlets with the angle cut on the end. That was crucial.
Correct. Sticking out pretty far. Those were
hit a couple bumps, lose a hanger, and then one pipe is hanging down, scraping on there. Yeah.
Well, you have it cut because you have the hills in San Francisco.
Oh, that's right.
You gotta go around.
That's right.
But yeah, those were, I mean, I remember seeing those as a kid and thinking that was your ticket into speed.
Totally.
Because they were affordable, because they just had this, it was a ridiculous thing. This is the 90s when I think engines were just getting smaller and sort of another malaise era, if you will. And seeing that, and right around then was when they started going retro with the new Mustang.
Correct.
And I think there was this appeal to a Mustang that still looked very singular.
Well, still pushrod, is still 5 liter. They'd gone down to 4.6 and wimpy overhead cams.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible. I really like those cars. I think, as you know, I had a turbo coupe Thunderbird, which had the SVO powertrain in it. So that's why I've always wanted an SVO.
Interesting.
I had one of those in high school and loved that car.
With the B-Wing?
No, it was the 80s Thunderbird body style. And then it had a Merkur power plant, which is also what's in the SVO. And it had dual like snouts on the SVO. What I like is has that asymmetrical scoop. It's like offset because the intercooler is top mounted on those. And the Thunderbird had 2 snouts down the middle, they weren't NACA ducts, but they looked kind of like NACA ducts. And then, but it wasn't a good drag, but it had a really nice 5-speed in it. It had rack and pinion steering. It had better weight distribution. It had vented disc brakes all around. It had 16-inch alloy wheels. Mine was triple maroon, and it had only about 180 or 190 horsepower, but it had a lot of torque. And it was the first turbocharged car I had, and it had wicked 80s turbo lag in it. It was really a terrible car. The clutch exploded on me. I had all kinds of problems, but it was pretty fast. It had an 85 mile an hour speedometer. And one time I drove it where the speedometer went all the way around and then hit the bottom of the stopper again. So it was probably about 120 miles an hour or something, looped it all the way around.
Sorry, officer. I actually have no idea how fast I was going.
Oh, well, the statute of limitations way ago. I was 16 years old. It's actually amazing. I didn't kill myself in that. Great car. Makes me want an SVO Mustang. Let's talk about a few other collections. One of the things I wanted to highlight, we have a couple repeat collections that come up year and year again that I think are worth noting from power sellers. I mentioned Driver Source earlier out of Texas. We love those guys. Every October, they offer a collection. I think they've done, do you have it pulled up? I think they've done at least 3 of them. And I presume they're going to do it again this year. But they do a really nice job of kind of usually a big mix of Ferraris and Porsches, kind of European exotics. Driver Source has also done at least one, maybe more than one gated collections, which is cool. Definitely. Yeah, Lamborghini and Ferraris with gated manual transmissions, which is awesome. And then more imports out of Monterey every year before Car Week. They do a collection, usually some cool Porsches, cool muscle cars in that collection. They do that every year. I presume they'll do that again this year. And then the big one I want to talk about with you is the Group P collection, which came out in 3 parts and had some of the most significant Porsches we've ever had on the website. That was not White Glove, but I'm sure you were following that one closely. Yeah. Yeah.
Not White Glove, but kind of groundbreaking as far as the offering was concerned and the people who were doing the offering too.
3 really impressive people behind it. Cam Ingram, who was on this podcast from Road Scholars, who you'll know. One heavily bearded guy who was behind all that, Magnus Walker. And then Steve Serio, Feminat is his username.
I'm looking at this video of Serio right here, talking on the announcement post here. Yeah.
Yeah, they did that in 3 chunks. And man, there are a lot of amazing cars. The one that always comes to the top of my mind, I've talked about on this podcast before, is the 908. Oh, there was a 910 also, but there was a 908, wasn't there also?
There was, in a different group.
But amazing collection and some of the best competition Porsches we've ever had on the site to loop it back to the SCRS. Some really, really great stuff. Any other collections that come to your brain, Beck? We've had big, we've had little, we've had famous names, we've had no names. It's really been all over the board.
Yeah, I mean, not to just keep it purely Porsche centric.
Well, you and I had a danger of talking about Porsche.
This happens with us. Wob had the race car collection, the Porsche race
that
cars.
Was sick. That plain yellow 997 GT3. It was an RSR, I think. GT3 RSR.
I believe it was.
No livery. Oh, man.
No livery. Other one was the great one. My favorite from that group was the 934.
Oh, yes.
Which is sort of.
That was the blue and white car?
With the painted person on the side who was driving the car. That was incredible. A Kremer Porsche 934. I also love 934s because it's such a weird sliver into still streetable, kind of the last of that. Very
correct.
Last
935 is not a street car. Although I think the Whittington brothers did drive there still but that's a pretty extreme car to be driving.
I bet in Japan there's a 935. There's 962s in Japan that like driving around on the street.
Right.
But yeah, 934s are kind of the last of that grouping. And it still has a lineage from the 935 to the 936 eventually. So that was really exciting. We haven't had another one of those on the site in I would love to. Absolutely would love to. Seinfeld very famously had his made into a street legal car, a 934.
Really?
And he was
I didn't know about that.
Orange car, very, very fun. And coincidentally, we have a former Jerry Seinfeld car that's going to be live on the site as part of the Lone Star All-Stars collection.
Oh, interesting. What kind of car is that?
Can you tease it? It's a 993 C2S, the final air-cooled Porsche made for the U.S. market.
No kidding.
Made for Jerry Seinfeld.
So a 98 build date?
Correct. 98 C2S in black over black.
And they were probably already making 996s at that point. Probably there was some crossover, yeah.
And this is a peculiar one because it's got a plaque in the trunk for Jerry Seinfeld saying that this is the last one for North America.
He was the original
owner.
Okay.
Original owner.
He was already an established Porsche guy by that point. They gave him a special car.
Because I think he also, I don't know if he owned it at the same time, but he owned the first 911, I want to say, and he shipped it back to Germany.
Wait, what do you mean the first 911?
The first...
Like a 901?
Like a 901, like the first ever.
Oh, wow. One. That's not in the Porsche Museum? That's surprising.
Might have been first U.S. market.
Okay.
Or maybe it was a 911.
There's only about 100 901s, I think.
But he had it shipped back to Germany to have them like restored for him. And so I wonder if there's a crossover.
He's got a 901 alloy roof, has a 901 that I think was his dad. He's owned it forever.
I think that's part of his origin story too, right?
They worked on like 356s and stuff. It was just like a family garage. Yeah.
But yeah,
I've never even seen a 901. Have you ever seen one?
Never seen one. Jeff Swart, I believe, had a 901.
Interesting. I've seen very early 911s, but I've never seen a 901.
No, never seen one.
Sorry, that was a tangent there. You were going to talk more about Jerry Seinfeld cars. Plug your collection back.
Sure. Remember, there's no commission, so I've got no financial interest in this.
I know. That's what you say.
Right. Yeah, so
this current collection, the Dallas collection, is mainly Porsches, right? Or is it all Porsches?
No, it's really only about a third. It's a third Porsches, a third Mercedes, and then a couple of 4x4s.
Okay.
Which goes back to that idea of like, well, what's really the connective tissue about this? And really what it sort of came down to was that each one of them, for the most part, is a very low mileage.
And cool spec.
Cool spec cars. Yeah. The collector loves convertibles. And so every one of these, if there was a convertible version of this car, this is that.
Which is not normally the case. Normally people are chasing coupes and no sunroofs and all that stuff. Yeah.
Correct. Typically, cabriolets are your way to a price discount. But
the older and fatter I get, the more I'm back. I'm just like, yes, convertibles. It's good to have the top down. I used to be one of those guys like, I need slick top, sunroof delete. No. Get that top down.
I've had a couple myself. I'm also very tall, so convertibles work well for me.
Yeah.
One of my first cars was an E30 Cabriolet. That was very helpful having a convertible top.
Sure.
And then also, I had my 2002 was actually at a sunroof, so that also helped. Definitely when you put a helmet on, is the only way I could fit in there. And then lastly, my Targa now is the only way I can drive a 911 at the same.
You almost always have the Targa top off.
It rarely is on the car.
Great.
It looks multiples better with the top off. You just can't. It's same with 328s with Ferraris. You've got to take the top off. But yeah, with these cars, a lot of convertibles, very low mileage examples. This Jerry Seinfeld car is going to be the final car to close. I think it's a reserve on it. I think it's actually relatively aggressive for what it is because the value add, what is really in the headline? Is it that Seinfeld owned it? Is it
it's the last one? That's the big deal. Yeah. What's the color on it? What's the spec?
Black over black.
Oh, interesting.
Which when I first saw it, I went to go to Dallas to see this car and I'm thinking like, why would you do that? And in talking to the owner, we kind of came to this appreciation, like it's a funeral.
Yeah.
It was the last air-cooled 911. Totally makes sense. Black over black.
It's grim.
It's very much so. Yes. We were definitely hindered by having to learn the start process for a 993.
Oh yeah, with the immobilizer.
Oh my
it's
God.
A nightmare. Yeah,
I've never driven a 993 like regularly at all, but holy cow.
I've set off alarms trying to start 993s before.
We never set off an alarm, but like multiple times we were couldn't get to start moving it. And it wasn't until someone who knew what they were doing. Yeah, that was an exciting one. But having all these cars in one place felt kind of special.
Totally.
Doing those group photos is something that we don't often get to do. We had a phenomenal location. We had a lot of time. The seller was very understanding, I think very accommodating for it. Because that is sort of the button on the collection. The one variable that we have to think about is if we're going to make this a collection event, we need a lead. We need a lead photo to go.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And that's one of the things we always do. We put together a site post for these collections. We always want something super compelling that somebody will land on, right? With all the cars, either grouped together or something interesting.
And the way that the site and pretty much every website that sells cars is situated is you're only going to have one picture to convince people to click on it.
Correct.
And so you need to have something that's enticing, something that shows that this is just special. And so that was what we got to work on with this collection was 8 of the cars, half of the collection was at this one location. We lined them all up in a particular, very specific way with what we thought was the most important stuff in the foreground and making sure all the cars lined up. We had a giant ladder that I was holding down fiercely because I'm very afraid that someone's going to fall down. Corey Mader is up there on the top step taking the group photo. We did some videos in the space as well. It was pretty special to be able to orchestrate all of that because that's something that is a unique skill set that like doesn't come up very often. And especially if you're dealing with someone's home, you have to be like very, very accommodating and you have to be very mindful about it versus if you're in like the parking lot of your dealership, maybe you've got a little bit more leeway. So that
probably helps to have your wedding photography background, right? You're used to being sensitive around that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all about like accommodating people's concern if they don't really understand what it takes to make these images. And if you're working with a professional, they're like, yeah, like working with Richard Rollins. I walk in the door, he says, whatever you need.
Yeah.
Whatever, like he's got a crew, he knows this. Yeah. But when you're dealing with a private party seller who they've seen these photos before, they say, I want that. I'm like, well,
do you know what it takes? Yeah, right. Yeah.
Do you really want that?
Well, that's Beck. That's why you're in charge of this stuff. You're good at being sensitive about it. It's amazing. Man, we didn't even touch on, like, I have so many collections that we didn't get to. So maybe we'll have to do a part 2. What do you think about that?
Can I give a few shout outs real quick?
Yeah, absolutely do it.
So White Glove has a team.
Oh, they sure do.
There's 3 other people on our team. Roland Halim, who has been working, he was number 2 in the White Glove.
Oh my God, you're going to shout at Roland? That's where we got to shut it down. No,
well,
love
Roland also interestingly started.
Roland. You also shot his wedding.
Yes, I was a photographer at his wedding as well. Also a guest. Laura Burton and Sam Cotter, who do a lot of our behind the scenes production work. That is kind of the thankless part of White Glove production.
Well, we thank them here publicly.
We thank them here. But I mean, like, as far as what the seller interacts with, they get to interact with Roland and I, and they see this sort of singular person, and they kind of
Sam and Laura are doing all the legit stuff.
Well, that's the whole point, right? Of hiring the professional to make it seem kind of easy, and they don't realize that it doesn't take one person; it takes multiple.
Sure.
And sometimes they're having to find photographers in places that you didn't know existed beforehand. And so to try and find someone, vet them, make sure their portfolio is adequate, that sort of stuff. And then also they're training these photographers. So we have a lot of photographers who've shot dozens of auctions for us, who sometimes we travel them around as well, and getting them into like the smooth running machine so that we can turn around sort of top tier listings for people is a trade that both of them have had to develop.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for doing all of this. I really appreciate it. I really do think we should either talk collections more, or maybe do one dedicated to Porsches, because we really didn't get to go. Maybe people are relieved we didn't go too deep, but sometime I would love to just talk Porsches the whole time. But thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me, man. It is very nice to sort of come out of the shadows and talk a little bit about.
You're one of the people who actually listens to the podcast. So
I listen to every single one of them.
So here you are on it. Are you going to listen to yourself? That's a tricky thing.
I don't know. I might have to ask someone to listen to it first and then see.
I have a very hard time with it. I do try to listen to each episode, and most of the time I'm just like, shut up, Alex. Like, stop talking over people. So I do try to do it for professional reasons to like try to get better, but I can only do it. I can only stomach myself once each episode.
It feels, what's nice from being a member of like the BAT family is it's a great way to listen in on the conversations that we would have had when we were a smaller team and all in the same place, and now we're everywhere. And I think that's probably the case for a lot of just people out there, that they don't necessarily get to have that interaction with their team, whatever that might be. And so for, I think, the rest of us, it is wonderful to have.
Well, it was a pleasure doing this with you. We'll continue the conversation downstairs, where maybe we'll use more curse words. But other than that, it's actually what it's like when we talk. So thanks, Beck. It was really a pleasure, man.
Fantastic being here, Alex. Thank you. We didn't get into World War II at all.
Another huge missed opportunity. That's how you guarantee everyone turns the podcast off. We'll forewarn people if we decide to go down that route. Thank you all for listening very much. As always, hope you enjoyed this one. Feedback, questions, concerns, criticism to podcast@bringatrailer.com. And we'll see you next time.